Okay, love. Yay. Tara doesn't drink. I asked her. She didn't want one. So just in case she becomes like favorite with our two authors. In any case, just to finish up before they begin the program, we have now got restocked the calendar and the Outlander kitchen book. They're already autographed, so you don't need to panic, but they will be outside and available until the end of the program. Don't give up your seat to rush out and get one. We will work it out. You can also always call the store and order by mail later. There we go. There may be a bathroom break at some unspecified moment in this program, and here's a warning, the women's room is freezing. So if there's a line, don't go inside, wait outside. In any case, Tara Bennett, this is your first event at the Poison Pen. Congratulations.
Supporting the book, and I can't thank you enough for the welcome and everybody on Twitter that's been so lovely and excited about being here. I'm so excited about meeting everybody too. So thank you very much. I guess we can just sit down and we'll start chatting, which is a good thing to do.
I'm really dehydrated. I had a mild asthma and I don't have my cover with me. I need caffeine.
I guess I'll just what Diane and I were going to do tonight is just kind of have a conversation about how the companion came to be, what our relationship has been in terms of working together on that book, and then we'll open it up to all of you to ask questions so you can grill us on whatever's interesting tonight. But my background is, if anybody has the book, I first got into the Outlander world from my cousin, who bought me Voyager, signed by you, when I think you did a book tour, probably at Walden's or Gabaldon back in the day when those existed. Yeah, and so she bought me Voyager and said, I met the author of his books, I read the first two, you have to, she didn't buy me 1 and 2, she bought me Voyager, and then she said, go buy everything that you need to get caught up, and I did, and I fell in love with the series, and so I followed it since then, and then my path to being part of, the ancillary part of the world was, I write companion guides, and I cover television shows for mostly nerdy places, like Blaster, and I'm a U.S. editor for SFX magazine, and so I've written, this is my 25th companion book, and which is wonderful, and I got the opportunity to do a blacklist book for Sony. And so when I did the book for Sony, I happened to say to the licensor, I know you're doing Outlander. Maybe if you're doing anything with Outlander, I would love to do that. And just put myself out there. And he, Chris Lucero over at Sony said, we are just getting ready to do that. And that is wonderful to know. And I said, I know the world. I've read the books. I've read them over and over again. And so I'm excited. And I've been covering the first season of the show for some of my outlets. So I already talked to Sam and Katrina back when everybody was still trying to launch the show and tell people what that was about. And then Chris came to me towards the end of last year and said, yeah, the book is yours. So I was beyond excited. Diane and I had actually met for the first season at New York Comic Con. That was the first time I met you when I had interviewed her and Ron for that. And then I introduced myself at San Diego Comic Con before, just so that it was a reminder to say, I'm going to write the book for you guys, and since then it's basically I started work on the book in January, and we got to talk. I think it was February was our interview, and we just really got into the fun of her being able to see this take on a whole other life in a new medium, and her writing the episode that she did for season 2, and it was just a really, really wonderful. I think we talked for about an hour and
an hour and a
half. It was really, really fantastic just to kind of also talk to another writer and see what it was like for her to see something that should have been on the page for so long turn into something that is somebody else's vision, but it's your vision at the same time, and how the weird, surreal part of that. So I figured we'd talk a little bit about that tonight, if you're all right with that. And then, and so when we had initially talked, you were finished with what you've done for season 2. So you do now have 2 seasons of a TV show for your world done. Is it feel less surreal now that you have had this long experience and you actually have 2 years of a TV show based on your world? Does you feel more of like a producer as you kind of shifted the role of seeing it actually exist and now working on it?
Well, now I know a lot more about the moving parts that go into it. You know, I watch the daily footage that they send me, and I recognize the people that I see, you know, with the clapper boards, and I recognize the voices of the camera people saying, "No!" And there's a red coat in my shot. Yeah, maybe can you just back up a little bit? I can still see your red. Or, you know, sitting there saying, and Katrina and Sam do the same scene for like the 14th time, and Katrina is putting away something that's supposed to be in her pocket. She's like, this goes there, and this goes here. Stupid costume. But, you know, I've been there. I spent 5 weeks, I think, on set toward the end of season 2, because I wrote the 11th episode out of 13. And well, when I wrote it, we fixed up which episode I was to have, and Ron said, you don't have to go to Scotland, you know, that block will be covered by the superior producer and so forth. And I said, because I'm not a producer, I'm just a consultant, and so forth. And you know, writers are low man on the totem pole, and I will tell you why in a few minutes. But I said, no, I really want to go and see it, because at this point I had seen all the scripts, all of the script outlines, and each script goes through 6, 7, 8 iterations of the whole thing before they get to shooting what they call a production draft. And then I had actually seen them make it. I'd been on set for one of the episodes in season 1 and had visited set briefly, and as I say, seen all the footage. And I said, I know damn well that what is on the page is not necessarily what's going to show up on camera. And I said, you know, even if I don't have final say, I will at least have input over what you do to my script. So I'd like to be there. And they were very obligingly agreed, and in fact they paid to fly me out there, rented me a flat in Glasgow, which was just lovely. I had a wonderful time, in spite of every single day being 12 to 14 hours standing outside wearing 6 layers of rubberized clothing, which was not nearly enough. And it really strikes you when you have to go to the bathroom and the only facilities are a honey wagon half a mile that way. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Well, I wanted to ask, you know, you write these books and it's a solo process. You know, you have research, you talk to other people, but when you're sitting there and you're writing, it's you. With a television show, they break it in a room, they oftentimes have lots of arguments about how an act's gonna look and things like that. So when you went to the office in California and met the writers, what was that? We talked a little bit about sharing with them, because I wish I could put all of the conversation in the book, but to hit some of the things that I wasn't able to put in there, what was the process for you kind of adjusting and taking your material that you're so familiar with and then suddenly having to have a conversation in the room about their logic versus your logic versus how that script took shape?
It was fine. As I said, I'd been with this process for, you know, a season and a half so far. I knew how it worked, and you know, I'd been in the writer's room before. I knew what they do when they break script. It's very literal. They take the book apart into all of its scenes and sub-scenes and quarter scenes, and they write every little bit on a magnetic strip, which they put on their whiteboard, and then they move these around. They strip out all of the dialogue, and they put it in a table, and then they'll use any of the lines wherever they can, which is why sometimes a line that you are used to hearing one character say appears in another character's mouth, because that's where they could fit it. And, you know, and I was a scientist in my previous incarnation, which means I looked for patterns. And, you know, it was very simple to see the patterns going on in this process. As I keep saying to people who are going, but I want to just go in, it's in the book. I'm going, it's not going to fit in the book. I said, I read Outlander myself. I used to be a volunteer reader for recording for the blind and dyslexic. And while I read scientific texts for them, they did let me read my own book when a request for it came up. So and you will have noticed how fast I talk. They told me, they said, we worried a little bit about your speed, so we blocked you. So the normal reader reads at about 120 words per minute. You read at 240. They said, luckily this is not a problem, because all of our clients have adjustable speed tape players, and they all crank up the speed anyway. So we asked them, and they said, oh no, she's our favorite reader. We don't have to turn her up at all. So anyway, but anyway, I read that book, and it took me 44 hours to read Outlander. Okay, you're not going to cram it in 13-hour of filming, given how long it takes to film everything, and that you only have an hour per week, that's the max. And so I said, plainly, everything in the book is not going to fit in the show, that's just the bottom line. And there's no use, whining and stomping your feet, it's not going to change. So it's going to be the pieces that they think will work best, will make the most dramatic pattern, and so forth. Totally fine by me. The other thing that I noticed and that I knew going in was that a TV show is arranged in episodes, which can't have escaped you, but that each episode has its own dramatic arc. Each episode has to be thematically united. Each episode has to start with, some sort of conflict or implied conflict and proceed to a state of resolution or suspense at the end of that. Okay, so you have these little hoop-shaped episodes which altogether build the arc of the season. Well, when I'm writing a book, I am God. I can do anything. Literally. Let's totally suspend the laws of nature if you want to. But that being so, the shape of the book is going to be what I see it is, and that's not going to be in these little half-hoop sort of things. And consequently, Outlander has 3 major climaxes that it rises to, and so forth. And, there's some slower, more pastoral parts, like the stuff at Lally Rock, where they're bringing in the harvest, and the men all fall asleep at the table and all this. It's very endearing and charming and so forth, because you can take your time reading that in the book, and, you've got half the book left, more exciting stuff is going to happen. You cannot do that on screen, because people will be like, why are they doing this? Same thing would happen here. Why are these people sleeping on screen? So you're not going to get much of that. Actually, they did film somewhat more of it that showed up in the episode, but there just wasn't room to do what there was beyond the potatoes. That was about it. That was as pastoral as we got. And you should have seen all the fuss there was about those potatoes. They had to have potatoes, luckily, because they had used Claire's scene in the first episode where she told Jenny to plant potatoes. And so I have to have potatoes. And so Anne Kenny was the senior writer and thus the executive producer on that block. So, I sort of followed her around and just put in my 2 cents, whatever it seemed appropriate. But they asked us to go out to the prop building to look at stuff for the episodes that we were shooting. And this huge place just filled with everything you can imagine. And if you can't imagine it, the props people can build it for you. But they had actually, for us, and the director had come out with this, they had arranged this little plastic sheet on the floor, and they brought in a lot of dirt, and they had built, potato humps. There were plants, planted in the humps and so forth. And they said, well, we're so sorry, we actually grew potatoes for this, but you waited so long to film this block that they all died. So we just got something vaguely potato looking from the nursery. We'll try and do it better by the time you film it. But this was just so they could decide, what was actually going to be in the scene where the potatoes were harvested and so forth. And the director was saying, well, I want somebody's foot, pushing on a spade or a hoe or whatever. And they said, oh, well, what exactly should that be? Because we have a spade and we have a hoe, and here's this thing that they actually used in the 18th century that looks like a pitchfork with 2 tines. Which one of those do you want to use? They sort of go, I don't know. Finally, they had them dig. They had brought in a bunch of potatoes as well, which they had buried under the fake plants. And so they practiced digging them all up, and so he could decide which one of the I think it was a mattock he finally decided to dug up with. And it was all about, well, how big should the potatoes be? And I told them, how big potatoes are. And they said, well, that's too small. Which is why, if you look at what's poured out on the lollipop table, it looks like the potatoes you get from the grocery store, because that's where they got them. They didn't actually say, there's such a thing as too much knowledge, but I can hear them thinking this whenever they looked at me. On the other hand, once in a while I got one in. On the same trip to the props thing, they took us around back and they had all kinds of props laid out on the table. One of the guys said, well, now one of the questions is in 208, where Colum and Lord Lovett are drinking together and so forth. What glasses should they be using? They had 4 different sets of glasses. And I pointed at one and said, those. And they said, oh, really? Okay, and picked one up. And I said, you know why? I said, it's because those things are what you call a shot glass. And it was what was traditionally used for signing things and documents and toasts and, important things that you would mark. And they were called that because they have a very thick bottom. There's like regular shot glasses that we see now and from the same heritage. But it's like a 2-inch block of glass at the bottom. So the thing was, you picked it up, you tossed off your drink, and then you went, sound of a gunshot. Yeah, that's what they did too. And in fact, they didn't get around to actually filming that procedure, but they did use those glasses. So that's kind of how it works.
When you went in to do your consultation and your on-scene producing for your episode, did you go to props and have some specific things that you wanted to do for that episode? Were there any additions or changes, based on what they had selected for your episode?
Well, most of what the props are asked to do is from the script. They'll go through and pick out all the objects, and then they, if necessary, ask questions, and then they make it or find it or buy it or whatever. And the first time we went to the prop shed, they were showing me with great pride these very genuinely aged 18th century ledgers. And I said, that's really cool. I said, however, in the 18th century, those books would have been new. That's all they made me was. The other thing was about Jamie's rosary, that because Jenny puts her rosary around his neck, to keep him safe when he leaves. Well, most of the people that they deal with there are not religious in the slightest, let alone being Catholics. So I drew a picture of what a rosary looks like, and so forth. But they evidently didn't take note of the spaces that I had put, so it turned out just being a straight string of beads with a crucifix attached. And I saw Sam put that on, and I said, wait a minute. I said, well, actually, no. And so they whipped it off and ran back, and by the time we had come back after lunch, they had a real one. And I think they went and bought it somewhere. Maybe they made it really fast, and they're very, very versatile. You see about anything you can think of. And they had this long map, the map that they're using in the beginning of 211, where they're putting the full armies with toothpicks. There was a big argument about what color to color the toothpicks. So I stayed out of that one. And Kelly said, you've got this line of the Jacobites, coming down from here to Derby. She said, I think I read somewhere that there were actually 2 lines that came down, and where is the other one? In case, we have any real historians who are looking at this map. And I said, you got me, I don't know how to find out. And so I called Susan McLean, I emailed Susan McLean-Kybet, who wrote Bonnie Prince Charlie and knows everything there is to know about the Jacobites. And I said, so is there 2? And she wrote back and said, oh yes, and explained why there were 2 and so forth. And she then sent everybody in the department a copy of her book about Bonnie Prince Charlie. I'm sure they'll appreciate that very much. They do. The point here is that they do take pains. They're very much into detail and quality, and you're getting it right. And often this takes a lot of struggle and back and forth input and research and things like that. And you're always under time pressure. They have what they call prep before you start doing writing. And this is actually a 4-week period where you kind of get all this stuff settled and put together, and you scout the locations. I'll tell you more about that one later. I don't want to talk too much on one question.
No, that's great. Well, how about Simon Callow's decapitated head? Did you get a chance to see that? Simon told me he was fascinated with that. He'd love to take it home with him.
Probably not after they finished with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, that was very cool. They took us back and hauled it out of its covered in the makeup trailer and showed it to us. We're going, oh, that's cool. Right? Yeah, it was very, very very good-like, but it was nicely done. Yeah. And they also had us come back to look at Rupert's eye, when they made Grant up with the shot. Anyway, it totally grossed Grant out. He couldn't stand to look at it. And so we're all leaning over, going, ooh, that's cool. And he's going, turning green. But they did a really good job with it. The makeup people are just absolutely wonderful. But about the head, that was, of course, a very, very important scene. In the original script, it had Murtaugh, pulling his broadsword, decapitating the Duke, and I said, look, check it with the armorer if you don't believe me, but you can't do that. I said, it won't work. I mean, Henry VIII had to get a special swordsman from France to decapitate, and Boleyn, because normally, I mean, you can hack somebody to death with a broadsword, no questions asked, but if you actually want his head to come off, you're going to need something like an axe. So they used an axe, and it worked fine. But to practice this, it was a rubber axe, by the way, so I'm being nervous about these things. And anyway, they practiced practiced it over and over and over, and they got right up to the decapitation, but not quite to it, because the thing was, Simon was wearing a blood bomb that was going to go off when the decapitation happened, and they said, once that goes off, it's going to ruin everything he's wearing and the head, so we can only do it once. So they actually had one of the stunt people, come and put on the rig and practice with him, and it's like a nice poof and blood all over the place, and it's like, okay, it works. All right, Simon, you're next. He was a little squeamish, but he's a real pro. So luckily it all went off well, and there was blood everywhere. He was standing on a plastic sheet, so we wouldn't get it on the tiles.
Let's talk about the Vengeance is Mine and the process then, once you had worked with the writers and then you had your production script, in terms of working with Anne or any of the other writers in terms of notes, was that a process for you that was unexpected, or was there anything in that process that was illuminating for you? Because in the scripting process, this was relatively new for you in terms of you've done the graphic novel, which is in its own kind of way the same format, but for the show. Tell me a little bit about working with them and the process.
No, it wasn't in any way a surprise. Like I say, I am a consultant. I've been writing those notes for the last 18 months. Yeah, no, I was totally expecting this. Everybody has their say-so. And Ron and Meryl are the first people to read a script and give their notes. And Ron did, and I fixed things in accordance with what he said. He made a quick pass through the script himself just because it was too long, but he's a very good editor. He said, I left your voice alone, I just, trimmed it here and there where I could. It was a beautiful job, first, I think. And then it goes to the stars and the Sony people. Each of those has input into what you see. They get to see all of the scripts, they get to see all of the episodes, and they get to say things about them. They have much more important opinion than I do, since they pay the bills. But anyway, it went to them, my script did, and it came back, and Ron forwarded it, and he said, this is really very light notes, really nothing to worry about. And it was, it was less than half a page. The first one was the funny one. It said, well, we love this script, but we're a little concerned that it sounds too much like Diana. We're worried that it will be noticeably tonally different than the other scripts, and so it will kind of stick out, and so we're wondering if you could maybe sound a little bit less like yourself. So I throttled it back where I could. Because, the thing is, these are very, very talented writers who are working on the show. They do a wonderful job, and it's a struggle to adapt material like this, which, goes all over the place, and which was originally written with no conception of, gravity or anything else, And so to make it actually reflect the story with truth and sincerity, that's a huge job, and they do it really, really well. But, the bottom line, if you come down to it, is that I am Jamie and Claire. I know how they sound. These writers are not Jamie and Claire, and they cannot, no matter how talented they are, make dialogue that sounds like mine. That's one reason why they do use as much as they can from the original dialogue in the books, is to emphasize the illusion that you are in fact watching a version of the books, which you are, but then the stuff that they have to write in themselves, it varies with the skill and the ear of each writer as to how close that is and how they do it. And I have some input on that with the scripts, because sometimes they will put in something that is way modern, and I'll say, there was one bit where Ira had put in episode 15, which was totally great, but he had a part where the guard brings the food down to Jamie in the dungeon, and he says, your luck can change any minute, and boyo. Well, it originally said, your luck can change any minute, Lucky Jim. And I wrote back and I said, well, I know what you mean, and it's perfectly good as an idiom. I said, but that comes from a novel called Lucky Jim, which was published in 1947. So really, there's probably a few people who still read Kingsley Amis. I do. And therefore, maybe you want to look for something different. And so he changed it to boyo, which is what I suggested. So anyway, it's kind of a back and forth, but, I put in things where I could see something that I think sounds off. And they have a lot of trouble with titles because all Americans have trouble with British titles, which appear on the surface to make no sense at all. You know, and I never did succeed completely in getting them to quit calling Lord George Murray Lord Murray. They're saying, no, he's the sixth son of a duke. He's not the duke, therefore he is not Lord Murray. His name is Lord George, which they thought was way too informal. I said, you may call him my Lord General, which they did in a few places, but there's still places where either the scriptwriters or the actors just couldn't get it and said Lord Murray, which none of the American audience would worry about, but the British people would be going, what? Well, half of them would, the other half don't care either. As for, beyond that, you know, none of the writers, none of them know the difference between lie and lay. So every time I point it out, I say, no, really, it's lie. I mean, really, I'm not going to go lay down. Half of you are laughing, the other half are like, what's wrong with that? That's the problem. I said, it was the 18th century. People used grammar. On these scripts, you know, sometime after the show finishes, I'm going to publish them all.
So once you had done, you've been on set for the first season, you did your cameo, you've met a lot of people that work on the show, you feel more comfortable. Now you come back for the second season on your own episode and doing your prep and such. What was the collaboration or the impact of the input that you had on the episode that you were most happy with, that you were really glad you were there that day, or that you had that interaction with somebody because it resulted in a scene that you were really happy with?
Well, I was really happy with almost all of the scenes that they did there, particularly so with Jamie and Claire and the little Gaelic prayer that they used. You know, I moved that from a place in the book, or that's actually in the next book, but I moved it because I thought it would be particularly apropos there. And I wanted there to be some Gaelic in that episode, which otherwise there would not have been, because they kind of got off using Gaelic after the first season. And I said, no, they were still speaking Gaelic. You know, let's use it where we can. And they did more when they got with the army, but I said, no, they're still speaking Gaelic. So I was pleased to get that in. And I was not actually there when they filmed that episode, but or filmed that scene, but it came out exactly the way that I had wanted it to come out. Beyond that, I mentioned prep and what you do. Well, one of the things that you do is the table read with everybody around the table, where you know they just go through the script and read it cold. And some of them will sort of halfway act while they're doing it. And Clive Russell, who's playing Lord Lovat, you know, was acting all over the place when he did this. And others are just reading it, you know, because you know, why should they act? There's no camera going, and so forth. It's just to see, so the writers and the producers can see how it hears. And how each thing plays just by the dialogue. And you can see the producers and the writers making notes all the way along as they're doing that. I didn't have to do that, I could just enjoy it. But, because I'd already made all my comments on the script and, you know, website on. But I was very pleased with that. They go around the round table. It's actually a square of tables put together. Everybody has a nameplate, but they all introduce themselves at the beginning, and they say, you know, I'm Sam Hewen playing Jamie Fraser, I'm Katrina Balfe playing Claire Fraser, and so forth, because we have new actors coming in with each episode, and they don't know anybody yet. And they may have never seen the show before. So they come around all the way, and they go through the executive producers. So I was at the very end, and I had my little tag there that said Diana Gabaldon, writer/consultant. So I picked it up and said, I'm Diana Gabaldon, writer, consultant, and generally interested party. Hopefully they'll laugh. But anyway, after they read 208 first, which was Anne's episode, and then they read 211, and much to my surprise, they all applauded, which they don't normally do at a table read, so it was very nice. One of the other things you do during prep is to go out and check the locations. The locations have already been selected by the location scouts that pick the places where they're going to film this or that scene or the sequence of scenes. But the producer and the writers and all of the crew chiefs, there are about 40 of them, and their assistants, all go out to the locations to figure out exactly what you need in terms of physical stuff and how exactly the scenes that you've chosen are going to play out here. So, for instance, we went to John Lanrig Castle, which was the Duke of Sandringham's house, Belmont house. And the first thing we did was walk into this enormous entry hall, which had a door at each end, and a fireplace, and a big carpet, and two huge chandeliers. And the AD, the assistant director, starts by pulling out his script and reading the heading of the first script and the description of the first scene. And he said, okay, the first scene we're going to shoot in here is when Mary comes in, and is caught by the villainous valet, the Anton. And so he said, and he turned to the director and said, so the first question is, which door do you want Mary to come in through? And the director looks around and he said, well, I don't know, but I want a fire in that fireplace. Immediately, 3 people spring out of this throng and rush over to the fireplace and start measuring it and looking up the chimney, because they use gas fires for everything, so they can control the height and the color and so forth. So they had to know what size gas fire they could fit in that furnace, and was the chimney actually open? And where were they going to run the power line for the outlet to the gas fire? And some of the places we went into, like the Palace at Colross, which is where the scene with the Gallic prayer was filmed, was in the master bedchamber there. As we were walking up, the producer behind me said, "Nobody mentioned fire." And we were being accompanied, by people from historic Scotland who are in charge of these premises. They don't want to hear that you want to set fires in their houses. So everybody keep their mouth shut. And in fact, I think they used a fake fire in that particular scene, just flickering stuff in the background. But a lot of the fires are not real. Some of them are. They are where they can manage that. All of the outside fires are gas fires as well, because you don't want them to go out while you're playing a scene in front of them.
Yeah, some of them are heritage sites, and they won't allow them to bring anything in, take anything out, or use anything that would create, something that would possibly create some kind of impact inside of it. But they're really good at figuring out ways to make things look as real as possible, which is really amazing.
And then again, they don't always pay strict attention to those rules. But
No.
Well, they are very careful about fire and things like that. But during the horse chase, that was held in Buravon Side Park. And it was a normal, road which had tire tracks and things like that. So they brought the greens crew, which is a crew of like 20 people, and they had a truck with these enormous bin bags full of leaves in the back. And so they would, between every take, they would, scratch out the tire marks from the camera truck with this rake and then scatter fresh leaves all over it. But before they even started filming, the director walked up and down, and the director of photography with him, and they were discussing, what do we want, what do we want, what do we want? And the greens crew Captain Chief was following them and making notes. And so then they vanished into the forest, came back with armloads of brush and small trees and things like that. And essentially they rearranged the landscape, which was kind of not in their contract, but nobody showed up to say we couldn't. And as they said, don't worry, we'll put everything back after.
They're exceptionally good at that. One of the things that they've given me, locations and props and dressing, is we weren't able to put in the book, maybe, hopefully there's a second one, this template where they come in and they show you look at every place that they're going to, and everything they have to dress. They take out the windows so that they look appropriate to the period. They will come in, clean everything up. And the reason why they've been able to go back to so many locations and why so many places have allowed them to come based on reputation is because they leave it perfect. Mm-hmm. They really have a reputation of coming in, making it look completely different, making everybody go, and then as soon as they walk in, there was someone here? How did that even happen? So they're really incredible with that.
It's amazing to watch the crew work. Every single shot you see, there are 200 people actually doing stuff while that shot is being made. And they're doing all kinds of different things. There's the cameramen, of course, who have their own crews as well for each camera. And the makeup people who spring out of hiding every time the camera stops and start rushing people with more makeup. And then there's the costume people who are lugging around these huge, most of this was outside, lugging around these huge bags filled with goose down filled coats. Every time they stopped, they would grab out a coat and swathe their actor in it so they wouldn't freeze to death before the next day. Yes, all of the ladies in episode 211 are wearing Uggs under their costumes. Yes, I was much admired because my Uggs were pink and theirs were all beige.
Well, in terms of, I know we talked in our conversation that once you finish with season 2, you have another book that's due. And so we had talked about whether or not you could, if you had any time to do a script for season 3, and obviously you've got deadlines for that. So how, as somebody that actually has a very important series to continue with, as well as all the other things that you do, it's a whole other animal to add a television show to your list of things to do. So how have you figured out how to you know, the first season you're launching, I'm sure there was so much interest in terms of all the casting and pre-production and all of it. Now that you've had 2 years, you work with these people, you know them, what are the things that are most important to you now in this process to be involved with, and what do you make time for in your daily, just an average week, for what their needs might be and what you want to be able to still have some say about as they're progressing to season 3?
Yeah, no, the scripts are the most important because that's where I can have the most influence. And this, as I was going to tell you, is why a writer is low man on the totem pole. You think, well, the script is everything. You know, this is the basis of all this planning and location and fixing and so forth, and that's true. However, I mentioned that we were all going around doing these production things. Well, behind Ann and me was the main producer, David Brown, who'd been on the phone just nonstop. Producers, this is what they do. They're on the phone nonstop, finding things, fixing things. Anyway, at the end of the second day, he said to Ann and me, come on in the office, we got to talk. He went back and there was our assistant and the director of photography. And he said, it's like this to Ann. He said, your script has, Mrs. Fitz and Leary, together. They were meant to be together in that scene. And Mrs. Fitz had come and Larry had come to, help her. Mrs. Fitz was taking care of Colin and so forth. And there were 5 scenes with both of them in it and so forth. And, Mrs. Fitz talks to Claire about Larry and kind of smooths the way and all that. Anyway, it worked reasonably well, assuming that you were okay with having Larry there in the first place, which I wasn't, but it wasn't my script. So I just said, this isn't going to work. They don't pay any attention to me when I say that kind of thing. And half the time I'm wrong and it does work. The other half I'm right. But I have a little scriptwriter and consultant, so they actually do pay attention to what I say. 9 times out of 10, if I point something out, they'll do something about it. And the 10th time, they'll explain why they can't. Well, in this instance, they were talking to Anne because it was her script, and they said, you have these 5 scenes with these 2 women. They said, David said, I've been on the phone with their agents, these actresses, for the last 2 days, and there is no way we could change their schedule. We have 4 days at Dean Castle, where this was being shot, to get this stuff done. We cannot have more days because they're using the castle for something else. It's got to be these 4 days, and Annette can come on day 1 and day 2, but not day 3 and day 4. Nell can come on day 3 and day 4, but not day 1 and day 2. In other words, you cannot have both those actresses, meaning those 5 scenes involving those 2 actresses have to be changed tonight because they're going to start, filming this stuff tomorrow or very shortly thereafter. And I can just see Anne kind of turning white and clenching her fist. But she's a pro. She's been in this business for 20 years. She's just going, okay. And then the director of photography said, well, there's another problem. By the way, it was also with her script because it was at Dean Castle again. And he said, the thing is, you've got 4 scenes at Dean Castle. You've got 7 scenes at Dean Castle to be shot on this one day. He said, it's Scotland. It's winter. The daylight goes at 3:30 in the afternoon. We cannot shoot we can't shoot anything, that is not a bona fide indoor scene after 3:30 in the afternoon. And these all take place in or around the courtyard, they need daylight. He said, I can shoot 4 of these scenes, which 4 do you want? And it was at that point that I realized, there's this huge crew, all of these logistics, expensively rented locations, etc. All of these things cost immensely to organize and put into place. The scriptwriter is already on salary. They don't cost you a penny if you make them work overtime. And the thing is, a script exists. Up until it's shot, it exists only in the mind of the writer, and it can be changed like that with no expense and no trauma other than to the writer, which is negligible in the great scheme of things.
The monster of having to do all of that, you really are in service of what the needs are, and it's rough out there in Scotland, especially with the weather and such, as you were saying, that there's so much that they have to rework, refigure out on the fly. They had so much mud and bad weather in last February when they were finishing the last blocks for the season, and they had to actually just move things and not shoot things and pray that they were going to be able to walk through the areas that they needed to walk through, and then, much less wheel in all the stuff that they needed to be able to show everything. So it's a very much on the fly show just because of the logistics of being in Scotland and knowing that you have to, a lot of shows choose to shoot someplace where they can have weather that's going to be great all the time. If they shoot in Georgia, if they shoot in Los Angeles, you've got pretty controllable weather. Vancouver, a lot of places have been able to figure out how to use that environment and the cold and the weather. But Scotland, they built the studio there for the show. And so because of that, exactly, they're stuck, and it's been a huge part of when you guys go out and work and produce your episode. That's why you may have on any other show a writer-producer that goes out, and they're there to answer questions. You know, if an actor has an issue that day, they don't know the motivation of why a character is doing something in the script that they read. That's why the writer-producer will be there. And a show like Outlander, it is sometimes last-minute dire changes, and they need the people to be there to go, all right, here's what's just been thrown at us. And as a writer, you know, keep the intention of what that scene was, but now do it here. It's not here anymore, here. But how can we still have that moment that we need, the intimacy that we need to keep, or the action or whatever's going to happen, and shift it around. And again, that's a great story also about sometimes the actors just aren't available. The core actors are contractual down to the show. Everybody that is recurring is not. So they have other jobs. You know, they may get a guest or a starring role on something else in an interim series, and while we all may love them a whole lot and they may want to come back, they're obligated to their first contract. And so that's why sometimes we didn't see characters in season 2 we wanted to see as much, or some opportunities for some character moments that we thought were going to happen between certain characters happen with others, because this show has such a large ensemble and a large, broad amount of characters that come in and out of the lives of Jamie and Claire, that a TV show can't hold them to a contract financially, as well as, you know, they just need to go do their other things too.
That actually had an impact on the episode that I wrote, because what we were talking about in the writer's room, I was saying, oh, you know, can I kill Rupert in this, as he does in the book, because this would be really affecting, you know, dramatic scene and so forth. I was looking forward to writing it, and they were saying, no, you can't kill Rupert. We want to keep him all the way through to Culloden, because Ron had this vision of Rupert and Angus standing together on Culloden Moor with the battle approaching. This was, you know, very appealing and so forth. I said, okay, can I shoot him in the head? They said, yes. And then we were talking, and I said, well, you know, could I maybe kill Angus? You know, Rupert in there. And they said, well, no, because we're going to kill Angus in the preceding episode. I was like, why? And they said, well, we were going to kill Willie, but then the little shed decided to go off and manage a theater instead. So since we can't have Willie, okay, we're going to kill Angus. So that's why you didn't see Willie, and that's why they wrote the script the way they did, describing him as that traitor.
So with season 3 now, what have been some of the most exciting things? You know, we've had some casting announcements now, and what's been the process in terms of your input, looking at people on tape, or actually being participating in any kind of the people that they've been looking at for some really key roles?
I have nothing to say about casting.
No, really?
No,
So
no.
nobody looking at...
No, they did show me Sam's and Katrina's tapes,
Right.
and Tobias's right up front, because, you know, it was important that I approve of them. They don't want me going on Facebook and saying, oh my God. They're probably less worried about that now. But anyway, you know, the casting people are wonderful. They've done just a terrific job, and, you know, I can tell if they're playing the part really well, but, you know, they wouldn't show me those tapes until after they picked them, at which point, you know, it's a done deal. So there's no point in them doing that. Now, they have for a long time, through the first 2 seasons, usually sent me the press releases when a casting is announced,
Right.
and asked me to put it up on social media. Well, the main star's publicist is on maternity leave, and consequently, the star's publicity has kind of gone way down. This is why you're not seeing things as frequently as you did previously, because she's still with her baby. She'll be back, I think, February or March. And she's just wonderful. Alana McGowan, she's a terrific publicist. But that being so, evidently she didn't leave directions that anybody should send me anything. So I pick up the casting announcements when I see them on Twitter or whatever. And at that point, of course, I put them up on Facebook and so forth. It really doesn't make any difference, because when they asked me to put stuff up, they would give it to me and say, well, this is going live with an exclusive, you know, to Hollywood Access at 10:01. So you wait till 10:02 and then you can put it up. This is what exclusive means, you know. So I mean, they have relations with all these publicity outlets, and you know, it's an honorable business within its realistic constraints.
So with season 3, then with the scripts, you said that how important they've been. Has it just been they will send you a draft? Are they doing their draft and then you're getting the draft before it goes to network? And how's it going in terms of, you know, it's a big season, it's a lot of things to get into the season, and how's the process of is it changed at all, how you provide your notes, or has it been more challenging because this is balancing a whole lot in this book in particular?
Yeah, well, it is actually much easier and much better than season 2, because as I said to Ron when he started with Dragonfly and Amber, I said this book was a son of a bitch to write. It's going to be the same way to adapt. And it was, you know, it's very difficult to take that much material that goes back and forth and in and out, and which was originally very, very carefully structured with the framing story and all that kind of stuff, to do what it does. You cannot keep that structure in a script, as I said, so they're going to have to do something different, which means pulling all of these elements out and deciding which elements will make a coherent narrative within each episode. And, you know, they did in fact film much more stuff than actually shows up in each episode. You lose a lot when the episode is put together and edited, because they, you know, the script will film everything that they think they might possibly need, and then they cut it and so forth. And sometimes, well, it's Ron who has the final decision over the cutting, and he'll look at it, and, you know, sometimes he makes the decisions that I would, and sometimes he doesn't. And they do show me the first and second cuts, and the third if it goes to that much. And, you know, I'm entitled to make comments and so forth, and sometimes, you know, I'll see something like, yeah, this just really doesn't work, and this is why, and, you know, we'll argue it out, and, you know, he listens to me, and I listen to him, and, you know, usually we arrive at something mutually compatible. Episode 16 of the first season, we didn't, you know, but he had to say over it, and, you know, and he had the argument of logistics on his side. He said, you know, I'm sorry, we really can't do the hot tub because, you know, you wouldn't, not only would it be expensive and time consuming to build the thing and to film in it, but you have no idea of the liabilities you get when you put actors in water. I said, you're right, I don't, okay, fine, yeah, I understand. And I can see that this would slow things down somewhat, and we have all these other things, but, you know, we had differences of opinion, and, yeah, it's his show, so he won.